Hey folks, thanks for stopping by and welcome back to my YouTube channel Czechoslovak Gun Stories. My name is Kuba and in today's episode we'll once again focus on the C75. In particular, we'll talk about all the sport shooting variants of C75 from the very beginning up until the introduction of C75 Tactical Sport, which I believe is the most advanced of the C75 designs if we talk about the competition handguns. So let's check it out. Before we start, I would like to mention that apart from the book on CC75 from David Pazdera that I showed you in the last episode, there's also another book from the same author which covers the more on the history of Česká zbrojovka itself, and one of the probably the biggest topic of the book is C75, obviously because this is the most famous product of Česká zbrojovka company, but this book provides a lot of details on other guns, not only the C75. So if you are Czech speaking or if you are just interested in the pictures, etc., I strongly recommend this book for you. If you can order it somehow, go ahead and do it. It's just packed with many details that I have no idea about, so really recommend you buying that book. Anyway, so let's start with the history on the competition models of the CZ75. CZ75 from the very beginning was a gun that was favored by sport shooters, especially in Austria and Germany. It became quite popular. It was, by the way, it was called a Brin pistol in Germany. Unfortunately, Brno factory had nothing to do with the C75s, but it was known as Brin pistol in Germany for quite some time, and it was popular there for sport shooting. However, from the very beginning of its production in 1975, there was no dedicated sport shooting pistol that would be offered directly by Česká zbrojovka. And so what all the competition shooters ended up doing was that they had to visit some gunsmiths and ask him to step in and kind of polish the design for them based on their requirements. We can have a look at one of the very early CC75s that were actually modified for combat shooting disciplines, which I mentioned in previous video. They were growing more and more popular in 1980s. So as you can tell from this pistol or from the picture, it has an over travel stop in the trigger guard. The trigger guard itself is slightly different. It has sort of a combat style reach or whatever on the trigger guard, which I don't think looks pretty nice. It's a little ugly, but yeah, back in the day it was a thing, and it still is a thing that some people really prefer to hold it like this. I actually never had a luck with this kind of grip. It just doesn't do the magic for me. I just use the ordinary good old grip where I put my all my fingers under the trigger guard. However, yeah, that's what the people were asking for back in the day, so this gun actually has this modification. And also you probably noticed the sights on this pistol, and these are actually adjustable in windage and elevation, which is good for competition shooting. I can probably guess these are different and maybe some smaller notch, which allows for more precise shots. And also it has some texture on the grip, which allows more, let's say, tighter grip of the pistol. So yeah, these were the early modifications when Česká zbrojovka was not offering a CC75 that would be dedicated for competition shooting. That all changed with the CC75's sister, which was known as CC85, which came out in 1985. It came out in 3 different versions, and one of them, the combat version, already had some features that were like really requested by the competition shooters, right? It had a screw that allowed you to limit the over travel of the trigger. It had sights that were windage and elevation adjustable, and in its later variant it had once again this very popular combat style trigger, which once again allowed you to use the grip that I don't have any luck with. So yeah, no problem with me if the gun doesn't have that feature. However, as I said, it was popular, so this was adopted on the CZ85 later. However, this was still a gun that would not be sufficient for the sport shooters. Unfortunately, Czechoslovakia in the late 1980s was still under the control of the communist government, so it was not the market that would really sort of give the inspiration to Česká zbrojovka primarily to what's gonna be produced in which numbers, etc. It was the Communist Party. They were poking their noses everywhere. So it was not only after the Velvet Revolution of 1989 when another firearm that was once again reflecting the requests and requirements from the sport shooters was introduced by Česká zbrojovka, and it was in 1992. This gun, we can have a look at the picture, was known as CC75 and CC85 Champion. CC75 and 85 Champion, once again, CC75 didn't have the ambidextrous safety and the catch slide release. CC85 had that feature, so if you were left-handed, you also had a chance to get a CC75 for competition purposes. As you can tell from the picture of the gun, it had a very nice two-tone finish, just like the Tactical Sport has. However, it had a flat-face trigger. It was a single action only trigger. It was a 2 and 5-ish pound trigger, which was much lighter than the trigger of the single action double action C75s, and it was slightly crisper than with the ordinary C75s. The gun also had a compensator. It had a different sights, which were windage and elevation adjustable, and this gun also had the combat trigger guard. And yeah, so it was the very first version that was dedicated directly for the competition shooters, especially the IPSC and IDPA. These were actually growing in popularity, so there was a lot of demand for these firearms. And Česká zbrojovka realized it in 1992 when they introduced this pistol. Interesting information regarding this model. It was actually developed by Stanislav Střížík, a very, let's say, talented sport shooter and also designer. He actually was a part of the team that designed the original C75 along with František Koutsky, who was the chief designer of the whole C75 thing. However, so it was him who actually was responsible for this first truly competition dedicated C75, and he actually continued to work on the project, and in 1995 he came up with a different version which was called C75 Modified. This once again has a single action only trigger. Once again, this is the 2.5 poundish trigger with flat face trigger, which is much better for competition shooting, as I can say, from shooting the CZ75 Tactical Sports for like 5 years now. But what is very important about this model, it had a full-length dust cover, which in combination with the inverted slide rails on the C75 means that the contact between slide and frame is much better. It helps to make it more tight, which helps not only the durability but also the accuracy, as well as it helps to reduce muzzle flip because you have more mass in front of the trigger guard or under the muzzle. So this helps you to really reduce the recoil. And yeah, so this gun was once again a nice step forward in terms of the design of CZ75 for competition purposes. And Stanislav Střížík actually continued with the development of CZ75 Modified, and along with another firearms designer and sport shooter, Milan Trkulja. You may know his name because he took part also on the project known as CC2075 Remy, one of the best, if not the best, concealed carry variant of C75. So these two guys actually developed the CZ75 modified into what's called CZ75 IPSC modified and CZ75 IPSC standard. So as you can tell from the name, these guns were meant to be used by the IPSC shooters and shooters from the similar types of combat shooting disciplines like IDPA, etc. And so this differed slightly. You can tell from the pictures. However, they featured once again the very similar feature from the previous version, like the flat-facing election trigger with 2.5 pound trigger pull, and also they were adjustable for over travel. They had the sights at the windage and elevation adjustable. They had in this category also beveled magwell, which allowed much faster mag reloads. And if there is something that the CZ75 IPSC is notable for, it's the frame. The frame is completely different than in case of the previous versions of the gun, and that's because it's based on CZ97 rather than on the original CZ75. That allowed the designers to use larger capacity magazines. These are the 20 round in unlimited, 20 round in 40 Smith & Wesson 70 round magazines. They are actually dedicated to these pistols, so you cannot use them in the ordinary C75s because they are quite thicker. However, that's not the only change that was done in terms of the frame itself. Apart from the frame being bigger, bulkier, and more durable, there's also a difference in terms of the trigger bar. So if you watch my previous video where I discussed the trigger system on the C75, if you haven't seen it, you can find it here. I said that the C75 had a double-sided trigger bar, right? Just like your 1911. So it went from both sides around the magazine in the magazine well, but this solution actually limited the space inside the mag well. So the designers decided to go another way, and they introduced the single-sided trigger bar. Now you may be wondering, is it not a step backwards in terms of the trigger pull? No, it's not. The double-sided trigger bar was there especially for double action, because in the double action tends to be much stiffer than the single action, obviously, and that helps to minimize the flexes of the trigger bar when the double action pull is applied. But since these guns were only single action, it was not necessary, and so they used the single-sided or one-sided trigger bar in this frame to provide more space for the magazine. On top of that, they actually sort of recessed the trigger bar inside the frame of the pistol, which helps to make even more space for the magazine. And so in the end, they were able to use the 20 round magazines instead of the 16 rounders that were used in the previous versions of this firearm. CZ75 IPSCs were very successful and were for quite some time a part of Česká zbrojovka catalog. It was like top-notch C75 for competition shooters. However, once again, the development goes forward, and in 2005, a new version based on the IPSC models was introduced. Once again, beefier lower or beefier frame, which actually takes the same high-capacity 20-round magazines. By the way, these were supposed to be made by Meggar, but Meggar in the end decided not to cooperate with Česká zbrojovka on the mag production, so Česká zbrojovka had to develop the magazines themselves, but they are of great quality. I had these for 5 years, thousands and thousands of rounds, and no malfunction on this gun whatsoever, not even one. So anyway, so the magazines, once again, high capacity 20 rounders. All the other features are quite similar to the IPSC. So that's the adjustable windage and elevation adjustable sight, one-sided trigger bar with a flat face trigger, which is from polymer now. It's adjustable for over travel, as well as it's adjustable for a trigger pull itself. So if you actually modify it using the screw inside the frame of the pistol, you can make the trigger almost like point trigger. I did it just for fun. I wanted to see how short the trigger can be on the C75, and I did it it was January, I believe. I was at the range and it was cold, and my fingers were very slightly shaking, and the first shot actually went off when I didn't even expect it. I put my finger on a trigger and it was like boom. So yeah, I don't really recommend you mess up with the trigger pull on Tactical Sport too much. Just let there a little bit. By the way, this gun is very empty. Let there just a little bit of take up, so that you don't end up with a trigger that is way too sensitive. Anyway, so as I mentioned, the trigger on the Tactical Sports from the technical perspective is very similar to the IPSC. The only difference is that it is even lighter. As I mentioned, the previous triggers were like 2.5 pound triggers. This is 1.6, 1.7 pound trigger, which is quite light, quite crisp. So for all the time I owned this pistol, I had no need to buy another set of springs and make it even better, because it's already out of the box quite a good trigger. I only actually ended up with modifying the over travel a little bit, so that there is no over travel on the trigger, and that's it. Nothing else was needed on the Tactical Sports from my perspective. So guys, that's it for the development of the competition dedicated pistols from Česká zbrojovka. We started with the bone stock C75 and ended up with truly magnificent Tactical Sports. This gun, which was in production from 2005, is no longer in production. It was removed from the catalog sometime in 2018, 2019, I believe. Although you may still find some on the shelves, because there may be some old stocks somewhere. If you find one, I really strongly suggest you buy this, because it's a really sweet shooter. It will probably remain in my collection forever. Anyway, these are no longer in production and are replaced as of 2021 by CZTS2. Once again, CZTS2 is like a slightly bigger brother of a Shadow 2. You can see from the picture that it borrows something in terms of the design, but I'm sure it will have the same very, very crisp single action trigger, and it will have the durability, reliability, and accuracy the Tactical Sport was known for, at least in my eyes. So I can't wait for a chance to compare this good old fella with its new brother. However, before I have the chance, let me just skip here. Hope you enjoyed, guys, this video today. Hope you learned something new about the history of the competition versions of the C75. In one of the future videos, we'll also cover the SPO1 versions, the SPO1 Shadow and the Shadow 2, and actually the whole way that led to our beloved Shadow 2. But let's stop here for today. So let me thank you for your attention here. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do subscribe to my channel. Also, like the video if you enjoyed the content, and should you have any remarks, questions, whatever you would like to share with me, use the comment section down there. It helps me with algorithms. It also makes me happy to see that you really are interested in these beautiful firearms. So thank you, and until next time.